welcome back to another episode of the South Star Classroom, formerly known as Common Grounds of Self-Determination. I've been told that a lot of people miss the old title and like the old title, but we wanted to make sure that you all are familiar with the South Star Classroom, because what we are here to do is we are a consultancy first, and we focus on equity. We focus on making sure Black and brown kids are getting what they need in education from a community standpoint. And all three of us are experts in various things. So if you want to learn more about that, reach out to any of us. But before we get into the show, I just wanted to make sure you all know that every single Friday, you can find us here at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And with no further ado, this young man has produced today's show. I'm very, very excited about it. You know what I mean? It's so funny because the one day he's hosting, he doesn't have his luscious hair blowing in the wind on us. You know what I mean? But I want to throw it to Omar Yanar to take it over for us. Oh, what are we talking about and learning today, brother?
What up, man? How you all doing today, man? We got a hell of a show for everybody today. It's going to be a wild ride. Before we even get into the topic of the show, I want to just go ahead and introduce we're the South Star Classroom. We're here every Friday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And just want to say hello to our incredible audience. Kanisha, how you doing? Good to hear from you. Happy Friday. Want to do just a quick wraparound and check-in. So, David, the Beard of Knowledge, how you doing, man? How was this week?
I'm good. We're just finishing off spring break. So my kid gets 2 weeks of spring break. So we had it last week and then just closing out this week. I got to say, I kind of like it because it kind of preps you for like summer. It doesn't feel like it was rushed. I'm ready to send them back like right now. But just getting ready for that home stretch, man. We got like 2 more months left of school, maybe even less. Getting ramped up. Not too much else is going on. Glad to be here. Looking forward to today's show.
All right. Good to hear it, man. Well, happy end of spring break. The doc, the real doctor, ladies and gentlemen, he's a real doctor. Dr. Charles Cole coming to us from Chicago, Illinois. How's it going, man? Are you inspired now?
We are going to make I'm going to make a sweater for you that just says, Omar is going to say he is a real doctor. I mean, you said verbatim the same every single time.
Yeah, man, that's right. I'm the real doctor, though. I'm not a doctor.
I'm impressed. I just need to make you a shirt that says that. But yeah, man, I am. I've been good. It's just been a busy time. I finally closed. I think I said this last time that I was closing out my Oakland apartment. I'm still going to be very much in Oakland. My main office is still very much in Oakland. I'm just going to get a hotel when I'm there, as opposed to paying rent for an empty apartment. So I have not abandoned the town. I am from the town, even though the town has abandoned me. Okay, Oakland is very, very different.
Oh, damn.
What I grew up. Yeah, man, it's just changed. It is not, man. I remember there was a time when Oakland was like a chocolate city, and then there was like this equilibrium that we had. It was us and the brown folks, and then all the white people started moving. It's just different now, and we are not. I don't even think we're top 2 in Oakland anymore. So I love Oakland forever, but so very sad. My car has made it here, though. My Oakland car has made it to Illinois, which I'm very, very happy about. I'm like a schoolboy. So I will leave it there on my end.
All right, man. Yeah, it's been one busy week. We got back from spring break a while ago. We are already getting ready for next school year, and we hope it's going to be an incredibly fun, productive school year. We're starting a sports program at our school. We're upping our transportation options. We're starting an entire entrepreneurship string for our students so that students are effectively starting businesses in high school and helping to learn how to expand their family businesses and so forth. So it's really exciting times, just a ton of work, but happy to be with you all. So speaking of schools, what are we talking about today? For our audience, it boils down to a very simple question. Have you ever been in that situation, that paradigm, where someone has simply said in the school system, that's not our job, that's the parent's job? Or as a parent, have you been in that situation where you have said, that's not a parent job, that's a school job? The title of today's conversation is, what responsibilities should a school encumber? We're going to do a deep dive, ladies and gentlemen, into a question about, have we ever had this conversation? has anyone actually defined what are the responsibilities that schools should take on? And what are the responsibilities parents should have? And if we ever bothered to actually have that conversation and establish definitively, this is where the school starts and stops, and this is where the parents start and stop. So, given this conversation, it reminds me of something that the doc and I were talking about. I know David's familiar, something called the tragedy of the commons. So, I'm going to go a little professor today. There's going to be a little bit of teaching. There's going to be some Socratic seminar. In fact, this show is very question based. So, not only am I going to be asking the doc and David a lot of questions, I'm asking you all as an audience questions, and for you all to chime in and participate in the conversation via the comment section. So this tragedy of the commons situation, I found a video that encapsulates it perfectly in a minute and a half. You're going to be like, what the hell does this have to do with education? But we shall explain. So Doc, can you roll that sweet footage?
Gotcha, man.
Back in 1833, William Foster Lloyd noticed something fascinating about the so-called common pastures. In other words, pastures without an owner, which can be used by everyone. He noticed that these common pastures were in considerably worse shape than those which had an owner. Why? Simply because the short-term self-interest of the people who were using those pastures made them consume too many resources, and in the long run, everyone suffered. George asked himself, should I buy another animal? And decided that yes, he'd make more money that way. He knew he was overloading the pasture, but didn't care. He wanted the extra money. The problem is that everyone did the same thing. In the end, the pasture was brutally overloaded and therefore became unusable. Some people made short-term profits, but in the long run, everyone lost. As far as the pastures which had an owner were concerned, this didn't happen because it was in the best interest of the owners to exploit their property sustainably. Today, similar situations occur frequently. For example, with fishing grounds such as the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, which used to be home to a huge cod population. About 50 years ago, however, technology enabled people to catch a lot more fish than before. The fish population, and thereby the fishing industry, collapsed by the 90s and might never recover. The same way, humans are doing everything from polluting their Earth's oceans and atmosphere to generating traffic jams during rush hour. There we have it, the tragedy of the commons.
All right, we just got a minute and a half review of a very complex economic idea. So you're asking yourself, what does this have to do with education? What does this have to do with the show? So I'm going to give you all another quick example and discuss how this impacts the world of education. The tragedy of the commons also happened, coincidentally or ironically, at a place called the Boston Commons. The Boston Commons is the park in the middle of Boston, much like Central Park. Beautiful place. Back in the day, a bunch of rich people said, we're going to build a big old park in the middle of Boston for everybody to enjoy. They did. They built this big old park. Everyone enjoyed it a whole lot. So much so, ladies and gentlemen, that they destroyed the park. Why? Because the people that built the park didn't assume the responsibility for upkeeping it or taking care of it. They just said, well, the people will take care of it. The people were like, someone's going to take care of this. And the city was like, no one told us to take care of this. What happens, ladies and gentlemen, in the tragedy of the commons is that because no one defined specifically who is responsible for what, nothing happens. Sound familiar? It happens every day in our school system. So this is how it relates to parents or schools, because we've never had the conversation about who is responsible for what. Oh, the social emotional development of the child, like developing a child's empathy, developing a child's sense of moral right and wrong. Has anyone defined whether or not that is the school's responsibility or the parents'? Then you got the tragedy of the commons, because no one assumed responsibility, it never gets done. So this is a very interesting conversation, because what we're stemming down is what is the school's responsibility and what are the parents' responsibility. So I want to shoot this over just to get us started, just to kind of get this template, just to get our audience going, to David and to Charles. In your opinion, what do you think the parents are responsible for? An audience, chime in. We want to hear you on the comments. What do you think the parents are responsible for in the education of a child?
I'll defer.
That's such a big question, Charles. You go.
I was going to defer to the parent, but I'll go first. It probably makes sense that I go first and let the parent actually give a better piece. Yeah. I think I actually, and honestly, my answer is going to be, I think it depends. I think it depends on the social contract that is kind of in place at the moment between said school and said parents, right? So I've been in situations where, I think my mother felt that her job was make sure I was fed, make sure I was clothed, make sure I have some home training and I didn't go up there acting a fool. And that I did the things that I was supposed to do. Like as a parent, my mother's job in that particular situation was, is he here on time? Is he good? Does he, behavioral stuff and all that. And the school's job was to make sure I learned, make sure I could read and do math. And I was, and if there was an issue and my behavior was the problem, that make sure that those teachers in that school notified my parents so they could tighten me up. I think that was a very tight, understanding of the difference between those roles. So for instance, if my mother, who is not an educator, who didn't actually even graduate high school at the time, or go to college, let alone go to college, her thing was, I don't have a degree in X, Y, and Z. My job is to get them here. Your job is to teach. So if you calling me more, then, and it got something to do with other than his behavior or this, that, and the third, because I'll tighten him up. I'll tell his dad and I can get the behaviors tightened up quick. You know what I mean? I think that was the delineation in my rearing. I will let the actual father, who also happens to be an educator, though, give you a much better, tighter answer than I did.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Great question. I would say as a parent, well, let's say, I think it depends. And I think it depends on, where you are, what part of the world you're in, what the local cultures are and what the expectations are around particular cultures. We're talking about here in the United States, in these regions where we live. I think there are home culture kind of, virtues, morals, ethics, family history, cultural history and tradition that for the most part should, in a perfect world, be passed down generation to generation in the home, right? I think in terms of schools, this really goes back to the bigger question of like, who's teaching our children? Are they people that look like the children from the community? Because then you kind of have a natural sync and synergy. It's tricky in schools where you have that disconnect, because then you have schools that are teaching virtues and morals and ethics, and that might not be how you were raised, right? So when I think of schools, I think, and I've thought about it for this show, in mass, like in general, keeping it very basic. Schools often try and do way too much, but I'm like, break it down to some core functions around the core areas of curriculum, of knowledge, right? Mathematics, reading, comprehension, writing, research, science, social science, but keeping the curriculum at a particular level, that where you're not going to be rowing in a different direction, than the home cultures of the students that you're serving. I think we're seeing that right now with, obviously it's connected to like CRT and then some of the sex education stuff that we're seeing. So I think that's what I would suggest there. I think also the home to school communication is also very important here with this question, because if schools are teaching things that maybe parents don't want them to be teaching or in a particular way, or if schools aren't teaching things that parents think they should be teaching, you've got to have good and open communication to make sure that you're adjusting as you go. Yeah.
All right. So you all basically answered very well, like what are parents responsible for, what schools responsible for. What I heard from this discussion from you all was essentially behavior is the parent's responsibility. I want my children to act right according to their culture and according to what we believe is appropriate behavior. Our boy Alonzo talked about parents are here to ensure that our kids have the tools necessary to succeed, even as simple as buying books and pencils. And from what I hear from you all, school is based on this ideology of just knowledge. Knowledge. Hey, teach my kid math, teach my kid how to read, skill sets that, our parents may or may not know how to do exceptionally well, but they send to school with the best intentions to do. Now, this is where the tragedy comes in.
And I think it's really interesting. I mean, not to interrupt. I'm going to keep going. In my understanding and how I've studied tragedy of the commons, I didn't think about it in this way. Like, I mean, for me, it was more of like what the examples were, right? Like, so for instance, if one corporation opens up, let's say Chevron in California, and there's not a lot of other ones, it might add some pollution to the sky or whatnot, but it's fine for the most part, and that entity gets the benefit. But when 1,000 Chevrons open up and then there is no regulation, it deteriorates the sky or whatnot, or how they had the grazing of the cows or the peace. I'm interested, like, how you're tying in like the school piece, you know what I mean, on that. And so yeah.
So let's use that example, right? So from the cow and the pastures, what they showed was when there's no owner, when no one's setting the parameters of saying this is allowed and this is not allowed, the land gets destroyed.
Yeah.
1,000 chevrons get to move into a place without any kind of stipulated regulation saying this is allowed, this is not allowed. It gets destroyed. What I'm tying in is saying, who owns these areas of educating the child? Right. Who owns teaching morality? Who owns teaching collaboration and principles like empathy? Who owns history? Because this is one heck of a conversation, ladies and gentlemen, because we've got parents all around being like, we own history. And the schools being like, no, that's usually ours. And schools being like, we own the racial discussion because you're not having it. You're being irresponsible, parents. You're not talking about race, so we're going to do it. And the parents being like, no, that's ours.
Or you're talking about it in a way that conflicts with how we talk about it, right?
Exactly. And this is, Charles, kind of what I'm getting into is that we're going to get later into the show kind of the implications and how these things are decided dependent on the culture and even the socioeconomic status of the community. But this is just basics to get our audience into the conversation.
I'm with you. I'm just making sure I keep my commentary in the realm of of tragedy of the commons. For all my MBA and MPA nerds out there, this is one of those conversations you might love. This is one of the few classes that MPA students and MBA students would share, and then it kind of diverges.
But where this connects, this connects in the basic essence of that schools and communities cannot agree on this is the parents' responsibility, this is the school responsibility. There is not a definitive division or a definition of saying this is what parents do, this is what schools do. And part of this conversation lends itself to a few things, like who the hell is responsible for deciding this? And then as David talked about, well, there should be open communication between the schools and the parents. And I'm like, you're going to hear from maybe like 5% of the parents who are very spoken. Do they speak for the 95% of the parents in the community? Therefore, do they get to represent the community and then decide this is what this community feels?
It's really interesting you say that. I think a very quick example, and I figured this out along the way when I was the head of school at my first time running a school that was actually made up of a mixed demographic, white, Black, Latino, Asian, mixed socioeconomics. At some point early on, I understood that 80% of the people that are knocking on my door asking for something shouldn't get 80% of my attention. My job is to engage with that other 20%, right? So I think that's kind of what you're talking about, is making sure, as we're supposedly delivering a public good. Are you really in sync with 100% of your people? Or are you doing the easy thing and giving the squeaky wheel the proverbial grease?
Right. Absolutely. And I think this gets into this one size fits all model of education and the agreeing to that. So this lends into, and I want David to kind of help take the reins for a bit. This lends itself to school models and choice, ladies and gentlemen. Now in the realm of choice and open school districts, and you got a Montessori school to choose from, or a no excuses school to choose from, or a traditional school to choose from, or an innovative design school to choose from. Private schools, if they have the affluence to do so, parents have probably had more choice in their child's education now more than ever. So, David, I kind of want you to help us break down. You've taught at these schools, no excuses, traditional, Montessori, innovative design. I would say that the school you ran in Oakland sounded very innovative. May have been in no excuses as well. So, just for our audience, break those models down to kind of help us understand what these models mean. And that will kind of take us into, all right, like the lines get blurry about what a school should be doing and what a parent should be doing when you understand these models.
Yep. So I guess thinking about the analogy of the tragedy of the commons, talking about common good. I don't really think. I mean, if you think about like what is a common good in terms of education, you're going to get a bunch of different answers from a bunch of different people. To break it down for the two of you and for people that are listening, thank you for the comments. They're coming in. This is great. I would say at the end of the day, like people should have access to great schooling, general schooling, right? Like what I talked about in an earlier show of like schools that maybe don't do innovation, but they do retrobation. You send your child here, they're going to be safe. You don't get a lot of bells and whistles, but we're going to educate your children. Here's what we're teaching. Here's how we're teaching it. And we're going to work closely with families and communities to make sure that we're in step with you all. Then on the flip side, and I've worked in communities where families, literally, I mean, they'll send their children to our school and they just won't ask a lot of questions because they may be immigrant families. They don't have the resource. Maybe they don't feel empowered, or maybe they just trust the school because it has a strong reputation. But it's like they are putting a lot of trust in the school, right, to do what they believe the school is going to do, and then we have to deliver on that. So that speaks to like the experience that I've had working in like high poverty schools for the most part, and then the school has to close the gap in terms of pulling parents in and making sure that you're connecting with families and helping to educate them around, empowering them around their child's education. And the flip side is you have kind of boutique, not just charter, but public and private and charter schools that are very hyper specialized with a very particular focus. And so I think of my time at Urban Montessori Charter School in Oakland. I also served on the board of a Waldorf charter in Oakland, rolling in those circles. And those schools are very specific around what they offer. And in my opinion, in many days, they probably say they are offering too much and they can actually deliver on. But people go there for the draw of the program in a different way. So I think at the end of the day, we talk about schools so much on this program. And when you really break it down, there's just so many different types of schools. Well-run districts, they run schools in each community and the schools are good and people live in the community. They send their kids to the school and people are generally happy. In some areas, the options aren't as robust, and then you start to see kind of a splintering. But I think through all of it, going back to the analogy of the pasture, is what was the problem in the pasture? There was no coordination. And so we're running school systems, private, public district, public charter, and like, where do you actually see government stepping in to actually coordinate these services to make sure that we're delivering what the public deserves.
Absolutely, man. Now, I'm going to throw a wrench into this and acknowledge a couple of comments from our audience. So, Alonzo, man, thank you so much for your comments. Absolutely. I think that you as a parent are taking the responsibility to do a lot of things that I will say I have heard point blank from our parents. Please do this for us. Straight up. And that's an interesting scenario. Funny, you mentioned the Julio Iglesias Netflix series,
Fluffy.
which is super funny, man. That's a great series.
I like Fluffy.
And you're talking about dropping kids. There's this movie from the 1990s called Pump Up the Volume with Christian Slater, about a school district in Phoenix, outside of Phoenix, in like Tempe or like Scottsdale, that were basically deciding who the bad kids were and finding a reason to expel them so that they wouldn't destroy their SAT scores. That exists. Now, Demetrio, you say our role is to determine their own educational philosophy. Who? The school? The parent? I'd like to hear a little bit more. Here's the wrench I'm going to throw in, gentlemen. When I was teaching middle school in outside of Austin, in the Round Rock School District, I developed the precursor for what I'm doing a little bit in my school now, which is I felt it was important to teach kids ownership of their actions, responsibility, the ability to collaborate. And straight up, my principal told me, Omar, did I hire you to teach responsibility? And I would arguably say, well, I would assume that's something that goes into education, is teaching students time management, being, responsible. And she's like, no, let me cut you off there. You teach the TEKS, and that's it. You teach the Texas Essential Knowledge and Standards, the state standards. That's all I'm asking you to do. You don't teach anything else. That was a very traditional ideology of a school saying, this is where the school starts, and this is where the parents, or the school ends and the parents begin. You don't teach responsibility, the parents do. I took it upon myself to be like, well, I'm not really seeing a whole lot of responsibility being taught by these parents. In fact, these parents are ludicrously irresponsible. I'm going to do it. And not only am I going to do it, I'm going to start a school and an organization that is teaching time management, responsibility, humility, hunger. And now you're seeing all the data come out from colleges and college graduates, and then the professional world that's saying, guess what these kids can't do? These kids are entitled. These kids can't fail because the parents have been coddling them and telling them that you're good, everything's great. They haven't taught them how to fail. Even Bill Gates talked about that in his valedictorian speech. It was like, what are you doing with these kids, man? So I want to throw a wrench in here to Charles, because I can see Charles already getting his
good.
And David to be like, let me take a definitive stand and say schools aren't teaching these things. I think that they should. And it's because I believe that the parents need support in teaching this, because I've not seen evidence that parents are handling this even in middle and upper middle income communities. So your thoughts, what are the implications of what a school should take on? I believe they should take on the social emotional learning. I believe they should take on social work. I believe they should teach essential soft skills like collaboration and responsibility. Mm-hmm. Some of our audience members may disagree. What are your thoughts on what the school should take on and the parents?
Yeah, I think it depends, man. And turn off your notifications. I think that's you. It's when it goes off, it's you taking it's taking over your mic. But
my bad. I'll turn them off.
You're good.
Our donations are coming in.
That's from the sponsorships, right? I think it depends though. I think we just need to be appreciating Omar, because y'all are in session today. He didn't get y'all some vocabulary words. One is we talked about the tragedy of the commons, where you need to understand what that is. Common good, which it does have an actual definition, right? Like it's something that's exclusory. I'm saying it wrong, but non-exclusionary. And then it's something that's rivalrous. So like rivalrous means basically if one person takes it, it takes it from somebody else. So clean water is a rivalrous thing. It's tied to this thing called game theory, right? And so when Omar is asking this question around what should the school teach or be able to teach, my answer is going to be one that's not really satisfying, but it is one that says it depends. It depends on what you signed up for. So if you are somebody who has put your kid in Catholic school, but you are not of the Catholic faith, you have to just expect that they're going to teach your kid like divinity, like through Catholicism, right? If you are somebody sending your kid to a traditional public school, though, I could see you saying, I don't know if I want these people in this place teaching my kid responsibility, because that is presupposing that we have the same beliefs as something else, right? So for instance, there was an article that we put into our own group chat where a group was trying to start an after school devil worshiping program. And it's like, oh, like that could be a problem for some people because I didn't sign up for that. But I think this is where choice comes in. I think that there are becoming more and more specialty schools. So if you sign your kid up for a zero tolerance charter school, you have to presuppose that your child is going to be exposed to the things that they believe in. So, I think this is where choice comes in at. I think that parents should have the right to choose and say, look, I want my kid to go to this type of school. Let me give you an example. In Oakland, there's a school for the gifted and talented. It's a really popular school. Zendaya went there. There's a lot. They had like a lot of famous folks that kind of went there actually, right? That went out and did Disney and are now in movies and stuff like that. And then some people said that the school was unfair because you had to audition to be in the school. And as a public school, it should be open to everybody. Well, yeah, but it's a gifted and talented art school. You know what I mean? Like, it is free for the public. Anybody can apply to it, but there's a certain level of skills there. So I think that there should be a clear standard for traditional public schools in your place and where you are. So if the state of Texas says, this is what we will be teaching your kid, and then I think that gives parents the choice if they want their kid there or not. If you don't define that, then you will get some parents pushing back around certain things. So for instance, sex education was something that was taught in my school, but we had to take this big ass packet home that had to get signed by parents. Or in middle school, I remember when an R movie was showed, there had to be something that went home to parents before. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the kids that had strong religious beliefs, their parents opted them out of it. So, I mean, I think that's the ground we're playing on. I think you run into issues, regardless if you think it's right or not, when you start going beyond the scope of what people think their kids are going to get. And then you do that. I would have an issue as a parent if my kid came home from school talking about some stuff that maybe I wasn't ready to have that conversation with them yet. Maybe I feel that the age 6, 7, or 8 is too early to talk about said thing. But here's the thing about law. I started out as a poli-sci major who was pre-law. Law school was the place where I wanted to initially go. The thing about laws is that what's good for the goose got to be good for the gander. So there might be moments where it's like, I agree with this. I actually think that we should be teaching our kids to be race conscious and understanding this and racism and this, that, and the third. But if I lived in a super red state and the state wanted to like let's say, I don't know, Tejas, and they wanted to say that there were happy slaves, or they wanted to teach, states' rights as like the most important thing and why that's important as we're talking about a slave like conversation, then I'm gonna have an issue with that. And that is that's just written into our Constitution. That's just written into what it means to be of life, liberty, and a pursuit of happiness in this country. So not the best answer for you, Omar, but I'm giving an adult answer. It's complicated, and everybody just needs to define what those things are and allow people to opt out if they need to.
So I want to just put a point on this and then have like David chime in. There's two things that I heard, many things, but
I know really I had a very long-winded answer. It was a complicated question.
In terms of the school that you're going to. I want to send my kid to a Catholic school. I want to send my kid to this charter school. That is great when there is choice and the parents have the availability of that choice to start self-selecting into schools that start fitting their choice manner. Now, listen, this is crazy. everyone talking about like look, I want every traditional school and every neighborhood school to be good. But in this me generation and iPhone generation and getting marketing so tailor made that it specifies every single niche and need that you need, are parents not looking for schools that start better fitting their ideological perspectives and the things that they'd like for their students? So I want to stamp this idea that this defies the traditional school model. Every school is great and we're all doing the same thing for the most part. This is saying, no, we need to start getting significantly more tailored in our school approach to give parents the choice. Now, the second thing I heard is that if you're in a traditional school, all right, you can opt out of the things that you don't agree with, but we're going to do them anyways. So we're going to show this R-rated movie. Out. We're going to do this sex ed, but you can opt out. And parents be like, what is this? So given those two thoughts, David, you got some ideas that you want to bounce out?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. I don't want to lose this train of thought, so I'll put it out there now. I think this conversation calls into question the whole concept or idea of educational standards, right? For public schools. I'm not talking about private schools. Every state has a set of standards. We've got the Common Core, which is a very broad, mechanism to say, in general, if your child is in this grade, this is what they should be learning, right? That's common knowledge. It's out there. People see it. It's what schools should be working from and then working backwards from that, right? So there's an awareness around that. I think number two, you mentioned, like, is it the role of schools to take on like social emotional learning? And my answer is, like Charles, it does depend, but I would also say yes. Mm-hmm. And the depend part is being conscientious, aware, sensitive to the needs of your local community, right? So you've got to work with your community. If you're doing SEL learning, and it's gotten so overblown now, it's totally out of control. I'll give you an example. Well, there's plenty of examples how social emotional learning has become like the new boogeyman, right? When I was the head of school at Urban Montessori Charter School, we realized that we're working with kids that are like transitional kindergarten up through 8th grade, very young, developmental years, right? Academically, we knew what we were tasked to deliver because it's in the state and the Common Core framework. We taught it differently through a Montessori lens because that was the emphasis of our program. But at the end of the day, we were going to report to parents student progress based on traditional educational standards, right? Instead of pencil and paper, the kids were doing beads and doing different kinds of Montessori activities, right? Social emotional learning, for what it looked like for us, and I still stand by this, it's a very common sense approach. We adopted a curriculum, we modified a curriculum. I'll name it. It's called the Toolbox. I've talked about it on this show. And basically, it was a curriculum. It was a grade level curriculum that went up from kindergarten to 1st, 2nd to 3rd, all the way to 8th grade. So vertical scaffolding, vertical integration, if you want to get technical. But there were 12 tools that we taught for young people. When you're in conflict, when you have a problem, pull out your tools and go through them and figure out which of these tools is going to help you to solve the problem. I won't go into what the tools are. I think it's an effective curriculum, but it really puts the onus and the responsibility on the student to make better decisions. I think we can all agree that that's a pretty much a universal public good if we're able to help children make good decisions. What we also did was we brought in parents and we ran workshops with parents on the curriculum. So it wasn't something that was happening in a silo that we were hiding. It was universal around the whole school community, this particular type of social emotional learning, and it was very effective. My last point is, directly related to this point because we were an independently run and managed charter school, and we could manage, adopt, and modify our own curriculum as our community saw fit. Going back to your earlier point, Omar and Charles, you talked to it too, and there's been some stuff floating around in the Twitter sphere. School districts are just too big, and they don't do innovation, they don't do change, very well. They
Oh, we lost our boy for a minute. He's frozen for
a
bit.
Okay, I thought that was my computer, man.
No. He's frozen for a bit. We got him. He was going off too. He was going there.
We need to get him back, man. That was really good.
Yeah, I just feel like, oh yeah, and there I'll address one of the audience members. She said, and I love me some Miss Toya, so I hope I get this right in my rebuttal. She says she's tired of people in charge coming up with curriculum without training parents on the curriculum. That's not a school's job to train parents on curriculum. Their job is to post what that curriculum may be or what those standards are, right? But their job is to teach your students, not to teach you. I think that it should be available. I think you should be like, yo, this is what we're doing. This is how we feel about it. You know what I'm saying? And then you can kind of go and poke at it or ask questions. I do think parents should be able to ask educators and teachers and principals, hey, what's the goal for this unit? What are the units, like holding people accountable to whether my child knows it? But if I was an educator, I'd be like, well, yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to come sit in the class, you can. But, you talk about tragedy of the commons. It's okay if one parent comes sits in a class, but if every parent want to be in class while this is happening, you're going to have to put some regulation around that. So I just think that this whole conversation and topic that you bring, Omar, around whose responsibility, I think this stuff is written out somewhere. And I think that we've just been mission creeping and creeping up and doing a whole bunch of different things. And the way that I do see it as a violation, or in sync more so, I should say, with tragedy of the commons is this stuff has been happening for a while. And when a few parents or a few people push back or a few schools do what they want to do. So for instance, I lived in Kentucky. There's a whole thing about church and state, right? But every traditional public school I went to had no issue with praying in school because it's a Bible Belt, Southern-esque, even though it's the Midwest, it still had a very Southern-esque type vibe. It didn't bother me and my family because I'm Christian. And most of the people that went to our school was Christian. But I'm sure if we had some Muslim students or some atheist students or, some Jewish students or whatnot, it might have been a bigger issue. And I think that's where the tragedy of the commons gets sparked. There's a lot of things that's good for the goose. And then when the gander got something to say about it, right? Oh, it's like, well, we gotta make sure we are protecting everyone and we have these things straight. What I will say to parents, Omar, and to the people that watch our show is, there are ways for you to be involved. And I do think that you should be able to ask questions. You just might not like the answer that you get to each of those questions. And I think that we're going to get to a place where people are going to start doing so much more letter of the law. You know what I mean? Like so much more of like, okay, we just going to do what the law, what the words are. Let's see.
So I want to open up this.
Toya said, then how do we help children with homework? I mean, get on the internet. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? It's like, listen, in the 5th grade, my dad could help me do math. In high school, when I'm doing like a different level algebra that he didn't have and he didn't do, I mean, it's not the school's job to also teach them algebra too. You know what I mean? Like we are conflating different things. If you have a child in elementary school and you're trying to teach Common Core math, or you trying to hold on a second. I know we are. Oh, David is back. I can get out of my argument with here. She said, example, Common Core. How can I help my kids with a new formula if I don't understand it? Get on YouTube. And I mean, if you're trying to get to a place where you can help your kid with that stuff, there are tools that's available to you. I don't know if it's fair to say to a teacher, I need you to also teach me I need you to also teach me the Pythagorean theorem so I can help my kid with. I don't. They're gonna say, here's the textbook. They got the examples in it. Here you go. I think that that's a bit of mission creep. You feel me? So that's just me.
No, I feel you. And we're gonna get David back on this. And
Yeah, David. Sorry, man. I gave another verbal.
What was I saying? I think I said Common Core twice, and I think the deep state took out my internet. So what was I swear, man. I'm gonna be careful now, okay?
No, man. You need to do is
what was the last thing I was saying? I think I was saying my last point was my second to the last point was like, that's why I think small independent charter schools can be very effective, because they can be more responsive to communities, right? We're talking about public good. How can you deliver a public good if you're a massive bureaucracy that can't even see people on the ground, right? And so my point being here again is that I think the public school districts, many of them in regions where we happen to be, in many of our large urban cities, they're just too big. And there's no way that you can be responsive and try and customize and localize, not just effective, but like meaningful and connected educational programs for children. Because the bigger you are, the more watered down and the more likely you are to like teach to the middle, right? So
right, man. I want to bring this up. I'm with you on this one. It's a great conversation, and Toya brings up several points. Thank you so much for all your comments, Toya. Now, I personally am on the other end of this side from what David, not from David's talking about, from what the doc's talking about. I get it. Is it the school's responsibility to help the parents with the homework and everything else? And I would say,
not help. She didn't say help. She
Yes.
said, I want you use the words that she said. She didn't say help. She said that it was without training parents on the curriculum.
Yes.
That's words are important. Help is very different than training parents on said curriculum.
So let me jump into that. I agree with Toya. Training. Now, when this is very self-selected, because like we are very upfront about what we do at the El Paso Leadership Academy. Parents choose to do and join us because not only do they want to be part of this school, but we help train them on here are the core principles, and here's how you can help with these core principles at this school. We also do training with parents to be like, you may not be able to understand these math concepts. So this is where maybe Doc and I align a bit. Look, man, I can't help my kid with calculus. How am I going to help my kid with calculus? However, what we can train parents to do, even if they have a rudimentary sense of math or English, is understanding how you can check on your child to determine what is their homework, how to determine what they have to achieve, how to determine if they can receive help during the need for that homework, and then ultimately like how the parent can essentially just check for completion, because a child will lie about homework. That if we can train the parents, be like, here's this tool that we got, this tech tool, and you can put it on your phone, we can print it out for you, you can pull it up on your computer if you've got those resources. Here are the 3 things that they need to have done, and it's all digitized, boom. See, that's where Toya and I are aligned to say, here's how I can hold my child accountable for the homework. But guess what? Accountability, one of our core traits. Parents sign up for that. And parents are trained to understand, here's how I can help my child stay accountable for their homework and learn accountability. Now, I don't want to get into the fact that like I'm trying to eliminate homework altogether and ensure that students have freedom and autonomy to finish it in school while they have an expertise to do it. Because why are we relying on parents to do this homework? And why are we robbing kids of the time that they have to be kids, that tiny amount of time that they have to be kids, and we're robbing of them 4 hours of homework? From age 14 to 18, I had 4 hours of homework every single night. Every night, Sunday night to Thursday night. So effectively, you start adding all that up. How many hours could I gotten back to do community service, to be a child, to play with my friends, develop other, civic and social relationships that I was giving up?
Fortnite.
Push.
Yeah, Fortnite, right? I mean, and I love that they went here because I so vehemently disagree with you. Like, I so disagree with you and Toya in the sense of what I'll say is I think that what you said, what you all provide for school, for parents from your school, is a nice to have. It is not a directive. It is not, you have to think about the management of resources. if you got 1,000 kids in your school and you got a lot of parents that make like, and I know this came up with Common Core, it's like, yo, as a teacher, you might be like, yo, here's the book, here goes some tips, here goes a website or whatever the case is, but I am teaching, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is what this is. But as a parent, there's gonna come a point where you can't teach it. You can't help your kid with homework. My parents could never help me with Spanish homework, but they can make sure I got it done. And if I wasn't, they could have a communicatory moment with my teacher and say, look, my kid's struggling with this. What do you suggest we do? Or, you know, can they come and get some tutoring somewhere or something like that? But it's hard enough already to teach kids the basic skills that they need. Now I got to be on the hook for teaching parents too? Nah, man. Now, if you got like a parent teacher, you know, situation that's happening, I think it's great to have resources. Hey, here are some great resources. Here's what we need you to do. Like, it's something saying, hey, make sure your kid reads 30 minutes at night, or make sure your kid reads 45 minutes at night. But when we start getting into middle school math and in high school math, especially depending on where your parents might have been in their own education, man, it's that expectation may be a bit much. I just want y'all to be, we can't even get teaching kids how to read and write and do math properly. Like, I don't know. I just feel like when you expand that to parents, I don't know how that's going to play out. I think you got a great school, but
because the crux of this conversation is look how difficult it is for three experts in the educational world to define what should and should not be happening. I want to ask you, Charles. I want to ask David, and then we got to wrap it up. David's having some connectivity issues. Charles, you hear about these Parent Bill of Rights, Florida, Texas. Really quickly, can you offer our audience just a quick summary of what these Parent Bill of Rights are? Because if not, I can handle that.
Well, I don't want to go in specifically because there's different Parent Bill of Rights depending on where you are. But basically, it's when a group of parents organize, sometimes with the help of the school or some teachers from the school, and they come up with, like, you know, something that's agreed upon between students and the education like apparatus, and say, look, here goes some new rights that we have. Here's what we want to have. And guess what? If you do that, and in that you negotiate some type of training for parents as far as like curriculum is established, then God bless you. I think that's again, like how I said, it depends. But parents are taking greater pains and steps to be very clear on what their rights are versus what the school's rights are, as it all relates to their children getting the education they need.
Yep. I've got something. I apologize for the technical difficulties.
It's okay. You got to get it out before Big State gets you again, brother.
I know they're coming for me, man. So the one thing I wanted to mention earlier too, and it's definitely connected, and it mainly has lived in the world of the charter schools. We talked about like no excuses. So charter schools and networks that are working and serving a very like high poverty, maybe immigrant populations, and then this connecting with the no excuses model, right? And then the teaching of grit and all these skills, right? I'm thinking of think about how the KIP National Network just did this whole transition away from work hard and be nice, right? It's something that we do have to call out that I'm going to call out in amongst mainly charter networks that maybe have teaching staff that don't look like the kids. Is what happens on the ground is that they're basically you coddle children all the way until they're like senior year, right? You lay out every step for them along the curricular path, along the decision-making path, along the college awareness, college application. And we're setting children into the world that, maybe have struggled in other ways, but have been supported to the point that, when they're in their first or second year of college, they don't really have the tools to deal with the things that they're going to be facing and challenged with, diversity, right? Dealing with like people that don't look like them. Why didn't you email me when I didn't turn my homework in? Because I'm your college professor. I don't do that. I don't do what your high school, staff used to do. And so I think that's another important point I wanted to get out, because we're talking about the role of schools, the common good, the public good. and I would hope that people that are listening to this or that will listen to this, take that into consideration, because I think, many of our school networks, especially as our children are getting to the age of matriculating out of K-12, we can actually be doing more harm than we're doing good if we're holding them up too enclosed with mega support systems before they are catapult into the real world.
This is one heck of a topic. And I don't think, so Charles brought this up earlier and he's like, someone wrote this down. I'm like, where? Like, and if they did, have circumstances changed so dramatically since then that we have to rethink where the parent's responsibility starts and ends and where the child's responsibility starts and ends. And I got to go with Toya here. How are we having roundtable discussions with our community to decipher these are some of the things that the school can do, these are some of the things that the parents can do? So, I'll give it up to one of our audience members. Juana, hey, thank you so much for being with us. Yes, school districts are huge. Juana basically said, like many of my parents, listen, what I can do is I can provide shelter for she didn't say this, but these are my parents. I can provide shelter for my kid. I can provide food for my kid. I can provide resources for my kid, but I need to get my kid to the school, because there at school, I'm hoping you will help us with all these other things like creative problem solving. Absolutely. Being able to empathize and form friendships. And what I'm getting at is, how are schools creating this community dialogue to understand what are the needs of the community? How do they service those needs? And I would say, maybe I didn't interpret this well from the doctor, but the doctor would be like, what, man, listen, like, that's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to teach math and reading, and that's it. And if we can do some other great stuff.
Now, what I said though, and I know we run on time, but you asked where was it? Here it is for California. Go to the California Department of Education. There's a whole section that says role and responsibilities. Yeah. I know this stuff because my doctor is in education, and I had to read it and learn it. And in every state, every traditional public school sector has somewhere what is our role versus and if it's not listed, you cannot assume that it is the role of said system. That's all. I'm with you all. I ain't fighting you. I'm just saying these things exist, brother. I will put the link for California in the chat for people.
Oh, I'm not debating whether they exist or not.
I got you. You said it's written down. You said where. So I was like, let me
you should share that with everybody, because that's incredible. I bet most of our audience members didn't even know that existed. I bet most of our audience members didn't know that, back in 1995, there was a Parent Bill of Rights passed in Texas. Currently, they're trying to pass rights in Florida that says the school has no right to interfere in the mental health of our child. That includes social emotional learning.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to start some.
That's crazy.
For our sponsors, I'm trying to start some mess. The whole intention is to debate these merits today and have our audience really kind of flip their brain around and be like, oh my God, yeah, these things are written, but did we agree to them? Are these things, yes, they're written, but who passed these laws and why? Yes, these things may be written, but are they what's best for the child? And that is a topic in conversation in the advent of this world, to say, are we getting into a place where choice is so important that we've got to be able to provide these choices? Or is there a backlash to simply saying, no, this is what schools do, this is what parents do, and if you like it, tough breaks, them breaks.
I want to go back to the pasture, right? And so in your comments about choice, so in my mind, I don't think we go back, and I don't think we open up the floodgates for farmers to do whatever they see fit given any potential opportunities that may exist, right? Again, I think there's a middle ground around schools and school systems where we are operating generally in an open landscape. You got to take all the things of redlining and all of that into consideration. School assignment by address, that's huge. But I think the concept of coordinated choice across public schools and even incorporating private schools, right? I think government can play a good role there to help facilitate that. Unfortunately, what we see on both sides is, on one side, government is entrenched, with, I think the American Federation of Teachers, like 99% of their campaign dollars have gone to like Democrats, right? So we're stuck there. And then you've got these ultra right wingers that don't want schools to teach children how to tie their shoelaces. That's the responsibility of the home. Okay, your kid's in 6th grade and they don't know how to walk because the shoes ain't tied, right? Somebody's got to teach them how to tie the shoes. So it feels like we're in this pendulum swing moment again. And what I'm calling for, what I'm hoping for, is some kind of like reasonable middle ground where we can get back to the business of working with communities to provide them with what they deserve, especially in the public school world.
Go ahead. I know we going.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll roll it into my final thought. I'll roll it in, and this will be my final thought. I actually I appreciate this conversation, and I want to be very clear. We might be having two different conversations around what's right versus what is. I think that there is a conversation, and what I'm hearing and what Omar is saying, or even what Toya is suggesting, is a what's right or what should be or how things could be. My conversation is very clear on what is. Let me give you an example, because here's a statement, and I work with this with my young people. Ignorance of the law or you not knowing the law does not exclude you from said law. So I bought this house and I love this house and I had a great mortgage. My mortgage is awesome. But there's something you have to do in Cook County. You have to declare that it's your primary residence so you can get these certain tax breaks. Unless you were served in the military, you got to pay house taxes. Well, I didn't know that needed to happen. And my escrow came out of whack. So I'm looking at my mortgage bill, which went from one number to another number. And it's not fair. I don't like it. I wish somebody would have sat me down and said, you need to do X, Y, and Z. So we don't think that you're just an investor that is renting out this house and making all this money as opposed to this being your primary residence. How does this fit with what we're talking about? Mm-hmm. I think what Omar and what Ms. Toya were talking about, well, listen, it sucks that I don't know how to do this, or you're switching up the curriculum, or I can't help my kid in doing it. But that doesn't mean it's said entity's responsibility or job to do that. If it happens, it's a blessing and it's a beautiful thing. But if you are agentic and if you have agency, what you are saying is you have discernment around, wait a second, what else should I know? I may not be an expert in doing this math, this, that, and the third, but I can reach out to my kid's teacher. I can say, what are the goals for this? I can ask you if they're struggling with this, what are my options on said thing or whatnot, right? And I mean, I think that's what it is. And I say this to somebody who has to pay this balloon rate because it took me a while to get stuff settled. But guess what? It's settled now. I know moving forward, I know that wherever I buy a house, it don't matter what the county is in this country, I'm going to ask those questions now. And that's just a part of learning. So I thought this was a great show. And that's where I think the disagreement was. And we were having a what is versus what should be conversation. And our premise was different from the onset.
I like it. All right, we are over time, ladies and gentlemen, and this is exactly what I hoped for from this show. And if you're wondering right now, oh my God, I don't know what you think, mission accomplished. Mission accomplished. Because as the doc articulately says, there is what is, and there is what should be. And we don't know exactly who gets to determine that, but on a show that was formerly called Common Grounds of Self-Determination, how are we being more proactive to self-determine what we feel our community needs, what our schools need, and what our kids need in order to be successful? The power lies in our hands to start defining these things and to be able to provide these options for our kids, and ultimately stop waiting around for government to do that for you. As Doc always says, ain't no one gonna come save you. We're out here on our own. So let's make some money moves and get out there and do the things that we did. Coming from a guy that made those moves and started the school coming from a dude like David who did those things at his schools, coming from a guy named Doc Charles Coles, who's empowering communities to do those things. For our audience, we want you to start solving some of those things and figuring out how you can have agency in your life and your kids' lives. So I want to send it out on behalf of Dr. Charles Cole, on behalf of the Beard of Knowledge, David Castillo. This is the South Star Classroom. As the doc always says, we are a consulting agency first and a show second. So if you, for any reason, would love to get in touch with us, please do. And we can provide some support to you, even if it's minimal support or comprehensive support. We are on every Friday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, and we will see you all next week. Have a blessed weekend, everybody.